What up, guys? The Bench Buddies are back with our college football week 4 preview and picks. This time, I finally do have Ty joining me here as we look to dive into one of the better weeks of college football we've seen in a while, not just this year, but in recent years. But before I get into it, hit that subscribe button down below to be entered into our giveaway of 500 subscribers. And then we'll start with last week's results. Obviously, Ty, you had a great week, lost on a 61-yard field goal. So you can't really be too mad about that. But then, you got the games right with Florida pulling off an upset and then the Houston TCU game. But out of those three, I think which one of these games stood out to you the most and why?
I'd say probably the Florida big win over Tennessee. A lot of people had high expectations for Tennessee to kind of replicate what they did last year. But I mean, we watched Joe Milton at Michigan, and that's really what led me to pick Florida. And I think that is going to show a lot about Georgia's schedule in turn because Tennessee was supposed to be the one tough game on their schedule. So they might have almost a cakewalk now
Mhm.
to an 11-1 or 12-0 regular season.
Yeah, for me, I'm going to go with that Georgia game. This team scored 3 points in the first half at home against South Carolina. And obviously, they came back and won, shut them out in the second half and whatnot. But it doesn't seem like they're as elite as last year. And I get that there's a new quarterback and whatnot, turnover, but something just isn't right there. And I think you might see this might be the year where I think every team could possibly have a loss heading into the college football playoff just because so many teams are kind of starting to fall back into that very good tier. But we'll start with our Wolverines. A decent game here. I think Rutgers is going to be a tough one. They always play Michigan tough. It seems like when we travel to Rutgers, but at the big house, I think this is when Michigan is going to turn it up. Harbaugh's back, obviously. Corum's looked great. And McCarthy's looking to prove that last week's game was a fluke with all those interceptions. So I got Michigan big here.
Yeah, I agree. I think getting Harbaugh back is big for Michigan. They look really sloppy this past week against Bowling Green, who's not a good team at all, but a lot of struggles there. So we'll see if they can kind of right the ship here. Rutgers is not the typical Rutgers. They have actually dominated their first three games against lowly opponents, but still they're dominating their way to 3-0. So they're better than usual. But like you said, I still like Michigan big here and a get right game.
Then on Fox, you have a game where Cincinnati's making their Big 12 debut against Oklahoma. And these Sooners aren't getting talked about enough, scoring over 150 points in the first three games. And yes, I know they're not playing these powerhouse teams, but you still got to score at the end of the day. And I think they're going to score a lot in this one. Now that Fickle's gone, Cincinnati's not as good as they have been. And I think Oklahoma's going to run it up late.
Yeah, I think maybe last week I might have picked Cincinnati in this game, but now they had that bad loss last week to Miami, Ohio. And Oklahoma, like you said, they haven't really played anyone like a lot of teams, but they have absolutely ran through their three opponents so far. So I think they are due for a pretty good year. Obviously, last year was disappointing, but I think they start off Big 12 play with a good road win here.
And then on ABC, I'm sure the game that almost every college football fan is going to be watching here at 12, Florida State, Clemson. Beginning of the year, people would have thought this is a top 10 matchup game, but Clemson falls to Duke and so on and so forth. I thought Florida State was going to be good, but I didn't think they were going to be this good this early heading into this game. I'm going with the Seminoles and the points. I think fourth quarter they pull away, probably win by at least a touchdown. The Seminoles just have something cooking. Mike Norvell's looked great as the head coach this year, taking a huge leap forward with Travis. And I think the Seminoles get this one done on the road.
Yeah, I haven't been impressed with either of these teams as of late. Obviously, Florida State escaped very narrowly over Boston College, and then Clemson just completely laid an egg in their first game against Duke. So I think you could really go either way here. Obviously, at Clemson is always a really tough task. But I think Florida State is going to get back up. I think maybe last week they were looking ahead a little bit. I think there was a lot of that going on. So this week, I think Clemson has their full attention, and I think they'll get the win on the road and really establish themselves as the new king in the ACC.
Then on Fox Sports 1, a very good game with SMU joining the American Conference this year and TCU obviously still in the Big 12. And this is, I want to say, a make or break game for TCU. Yes, it's an out of conference game, but it just seems like it means more now, obviously, with the loss to Colorado. If they want to get back to where they almost were last year, they got to keep winning these tough games early in the season. I think they get it done, take care of business here against a tough SMU team.
Yeah, I also think TCU escapes here, and they need to start winning, like you said. They need to keep some momentum from that playoff berth last year. Otherwise, I mean, if you can't build momentum 1 year after that, that could be a problem moving forward. So I think they get this win at home. I think it'll be very close though.
Then heading to the 3:30 games on NBC, you got Maryland, Michigan State, and lots of confusion on the Michigan State side, not just football sides, outside of football with Mel Tucker, and just because of all of that that's going on and how they got absolutely destroyed last week to Washington, makes me just think the Maryland pick is too easy. But I do think this is going to be closer than people think. I'm not going to bet on this game at all, but if I would, I'm taking Maryland money line.
Yep, it is still September, which means you get September Maryland, who is a much better team than November Maryland. Talia Tagovailoa is going to tear up that secondary. As you saw last week, Michael Penix almost threw for 400 in the first half. So I think it's going to be another game like that. I think Michigan State will put up some points, but that secondary is really reeling, and I think Maryland will take advantage.
Then on CBS, a battle of a surprisingly flip-flopped team. Alabama with their first loss this year this early is very uncharacteristic of them. And yeah, you're looking at that right. I'm thinking they're going to get their second loss. Last week showing pretty much the cherry on top for me, saying that Bama isn't good this year. I think I say that because they still don't know the quarterback situation. I know Milroe is going to start again in this one, but if you roll out two guys against an awful USF team and you still can't figure it out, I just think there's too much confusion where Lane Kiffin gets the better of Nick Saban and Jackson Dart has a great game.
Yeah, this just feels like a game where Alabama's gonna escape in the end with either winning overtime, game-winning field goal, something like that. I just think Ole Miss is more of a run-heavy team, and I think teams are gonna beat Alabama this year by testing their secondary, which looks a little weak. I don't know if Ole Miss is gonna do that, so I think Alabama's gonna survive here, maybe a lower scoring game like last week.
And on Fox, a battle of the unbeatens and then heading into Pac-12 play, a game that if you like lots of scoring, I don't think you're going to get it out of this one. Now that Utah still's Cam Rising questionable, UCLA, they've lost a lot from last year, but they keep finding ways to win games. And I'm going with the Bruins on the road. I just like what they're doing so far. The turnover rate really was a lot last year, but now they've eliminated that. And this Bruin team, I think they're due for a big win to really get back into the thick of things of college football.
Yeah, I think Utah wins by double digits if Rising plays. If he doesn't, I think they're just going to continue to ride the defense like they have their first three games. You saw that against Florida where they just demolished them on that side of the ball. And I think Dante Moore, the freshman quarterback for UCLA, I think he's going to struggle against this Utah defense. He's never seen anything like this. So I think UCLA can put up some points, but Utah's defense is just too tough this week.
Then on ABC, I'm sure this is the game that most of the nation is going to watch if you're not involved with those four teams that we just talked about, Colorado, Oregon. And this is the game where I think Dion, Coach Prime, has to prove himself that he still is like this team is legit. And I know that they beat TCU on the road, escaped last week at home in the rivalry, but it's just to the point where he has to prove it every week because they have that target on their back already. And I'm definitely taking the points here. I think Colorado covers, but I just don't see a way where they go into Oregon, the best team in the Pac-12 for the last 5-10 years, you want to say, and get that win in his first conference matchup. That's going to be a whole different environment than that TCU game.
Yeah, I think it'd be very hard to not take the points here for Colorado, given how their first three games have gone. But I think Bo Nix is going to light up that defense. Obviously, Travis Hunter out this week. So Colorado does not have a lot to work with on defense. Yes, they have Shiloh, but other than that, not a whole lot there. So I think Bo Nix, the seasoned quarterback, I think it's his fifth year this year. I think he's really going to have a field day for Oregon, and they'll put up a lot of points and Colorado will finally come back down to earth this week.
And then moving to the 7 o'clock games, Arkansas, LSU, two teams that probably should have been, could have been, would have been 3-0 at this point in the season. It really feels like it is that kind of game. It means so much already to these teams. And, obviously LSU is the heavy favorite in this one, and I'm going with them. But expect some fight out of Arkansas. They always play the top tier teams like LSU, Bama, even Tennessee now and Georgia. They always play those top teams very well till about the fourth quarter where they start to pull away. So if we're going with bets here, I got to go with Arkansas on the points, but for the straight pick, I'm going LSU.
Yeah, I'm gonna stick with LSU here. I think they are still a really good team, and I think they really have a chip on their shoulder now after how that first game went. Obviously, kind of getting their doors blown off by Florida State. They have to be perfect now the rest of the season. I don't think two losses is going to get them in. So they really have no room for error, and I think they're going to start playing like that. In Arkansas, I think we expected them to do something last year, and they didn't. And now they have that BYU loss. So I think LSU is going to run away with this one.
Then on Fox, you have a great game in which is a very underrated Oregon State, Washington State, and give me the Cougs. I think Washington State is really going to pull this one out at home. And I know if this was at Oregon State, I would 100% flip my pick to Oregon State. It just feels like one of those games where it does matter who's home and who's going to win this game, and that's why I'm going with Washington State.
Yeah, I think that home field advantage means just enough. This was a coin flip for me, and I'm going with the home team. Unfortunately, for both of these teams, these are set to be two group of five teams next year, and they're really solid Power Five teams this year. So, but as for the game, I think two quarterbacks have played really well this year. You're going to see some points, you're going to see some highlight plays from both of them. But I think Washington State will lean on their defense for a couple big plays, and they'll win a close game here at home.
And then the biggest game of them all this week, Ohio State, Notre Dame, and give me the Fighting Irish. I think Sam Hartman is the factor. And the reason why Notre Dame can't win these big games in previous years is because the quarterback play. And now I think Hartman's better than McCord. Notre Dame, I think, has a better running game too with Austin. And, the defense is going to be the big question mark for both of these teams. Who can stop who early and often? I'm going to go with a slight edge to Notre Dame. If this was in Columbus, I'm with you. I think I got to go with Ohio State. But this time it's in South Bend, and I just think this Notre Dame team is a completely different team this year. So I'm going with the Irish.
Yeah, I gotta say I'm pulling hard for Notre Dame. Really hope they can pull this off. I just don't quite see it yet. Notre Dame just has not proved to me in the last, I don't know, 20 years that they can win a game like this. And until they do, I think I gotta go with Ohio State here. Yes, Notre Dame beat Clemson last year. The stakes are so high for Notre Dame here. Last year, I think they already had three losses going into that game. This is a huge game for both teams, and I gotta go with Ohio State, the team who's been there and done it before. I actually think this is going to be more of a shootout type of game. I think there's a lot of question marks, like you said, for both defenses. Notre Dame's going to run the ball really well. Ohio State will throw the ball really well. But in the end, I think the Buckeyes will score just enough to hold off Notre Dame.
And on CBS, a battle of the Big Ten starting up their conference play with Penn State and Iowa. And Penn State last week took care of business against Illinois, and now they get Iowa coming to town. And the 15-point spread is no joke. I think Penn State is going to probably put up 31 on a good Iowa defense. But that's the concern for me is if Penn State does put up, I would say at least 20 points, there's no way Iowa's going to keep up. We thought Cade McNamara and Eric All coming from Michigan to Iowa would really rejuvenize this Iowa offense, but they've struggled, haven't really shown to me that they can compete with these top teams in the Big Ten. So I got to go with Penn State.
Yeah, I got Penn State as well. I think Iowa's going to really struggle to move the ball on offense. Yes, they brought in Cade McNamara, but they still have Brian Ferentz. So I don't see them moving the ball super well. And Penn State has one of the best defenses in the country, if not the best. I think they're really an underrated team, and I think they're going to prove it this weekend. I think this will be not a super fun game to watch. I think it'll be more like a 24-3 type of game. I think Penn State's going to really show the nation why they're a top 10, maybe a top five team.
Then the last game of the week, UCF, Kansas State. And this is a big game for both of these teams earlier in the year. If these teams want to really compete towards the end of the year in the Big 12, this is where it starts. And especially for UCF, obviously their first Big 12 game of their career. And I think they're going to go in and get the win here. It's a tough spread. I know it's a tough place to play Kansas State, especially now with Big 12 games are starting. But I like the Knights. I like what they're doing down there in Orlando, and I think they're going to get this win.
Yeah, this just feels like a must win almost for Kansas State. They went in as the Big 12 favorites this year alongside Texas. And I think another loss here would really just send a lot of question marks out around this program. Was last year a fluke? because obviously they hadn't had that type of success in 10 years, what they did last year. So, similar to TCU, it's a one-loss team who feels like another loss could really send them back to almost being mediocre. So it feels like a game that they need, and I think for that reason they will get this home win.
And that's going to be it for this week's video. Make sure you guys come back next week to see how we did, and we pick the games next week. But until the next time, the Bench Buddies are out.